Imagine a jar filled with water. Every drop you add represents a worry, a responsibility, or a stressful thought. Initially, the jar seems spacious, but day by day, as more drops fall in, it overflows. That overflow is what we feel as stress. Now, what if I told you that learning to manage stress is not about emptying the jar, but about learning to control the drops, and even finding ways to drink from the jar wisely? Today, we will explore exactly that journey, how to deal with stress in a way that doesn't drown us, but helps us grow. Stress is a silent companion that walks with all of us, often unnoticed until it sits heavily on our shoulders. At first, it feels subtle, almost like a whisper in the background, nudging us to pay attention. But over time, if left unchecked, that whisper grows louder, turning into a weight that bends even the strongest of spirits. It is not the events themselves that create this burden, but the way our mind reacts to them. A missed deadline, a disagreement with someone we care about, a sudden change in plans, these are not inherently destructive, yet they can overwhelm us if we treat them as mountains rather than stepping stones. Consider a small story. There was once a young artist who poured her heart into every painting she created. Each brushstroke carried her hopes, her dreams, and her fear of failure. As commissions came in and deadlines loomed, she began to feel the walls closing in. Every unfinished canvas became a source of guilt. Every critique felt like a personal attack. Her body ached, her sleep disappeared, and joy seemed like a distant memory. One day, she paused and looked at her work, not with the lens of fear, but curiosity. She realized that stress was not a punishment, but a signal, an alarm urging her to slow down, to breathe, and to choose which pressures deserved her energy. The weight lifted, not because the challenges vanished, but because her perception changed. Stress is like that. It is invisible yet tangible, simple yet complex. It can act as an invisible shadow, following us from the moment we wake until we close our eyes at night. Some see it as a sign of weakness, something to resist or hide from. Others mistake it for a motivator, pushing themselves relentlessly until exhaustion replaces energy. Neither approach works. The first makes us prisoners of our own minds, while the second treats our body and spirit as mere tools for achievement. True understanding comes when we recognize stress as a natural response, a signal that our system is engaged, alert, and alive. The mind under stress behaves unpredictably. Thoughts spiral, decisions feel heavier, and small problems appear insurmountable. Yet, if approached wisely, stress can sharpen focus, build resilience, and even spark creativity. Like pressure shaping a diamond, life's challenges, when met with awareness and calm, can reveal clarity, strength, and brilliance hidden within us. Understanding stress is the first step, not in trying to eliminate it entirely, but in learning to navigate it with presence, awareness, and a gentle sense of control. When we see stress in this light, it stops being an enemy. It becomes a teacher, a messenger, a mirror showing us where our priorities lie and how much care we give to ourselves. Every moment of tension becomes an opportunity to pause, to observe, and to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. The journey begins not by changing the world around us, but by changing how we perceive and respond to the world within. Each of us carries a unique map of stress, one drawn by the experiences, fears, and expectations that shape our lives. What rattles one person may barely disturb another. The key to navigating stress lies in understanding its source, in identifying those hidden triggers that quietly accumulate until they burst forth. Often these triggers are subtle, a glance, a word, a situation that seems trivial at first. Yet over time the mind collects them like pebbles in a pocket, and suddenly the weight becomes unbearable. There was a man who always felt drained after work, his evenings clouded with tension he could not name. He tried to push through, telling himself that life was simply demanding, that everyone had burdens, that he needed to be stronger. One evening, exhausted and frustrated, he decided to make a list of the moments that left him tense. As he wrote, a pattern emerged. It was not the work itself, but the constant interruptions, the lack of clarity, the unspoken expectations from colleagues that gnawed at him. Once he could see the triggers, the fear and irritation began to lose their power. Awareness, he realized, was a kind of freedom. Stress does not always announce itself with a drumbeat. Sometimes it sneaks in as a racing heartbeat, a restless night, or the inability to focus. The first step is noticing it, acknowledging it, and being honest about what brings it forth. Some of these triggers come from relationships, the sharp words of a friend, the silent judgment of a family member, the constant comparison to others. Others emerge from within our own ambitions, our self-criticism, our fear of failure. When we ignore these sparks, they ignite a fire that consumes energy, joy, and peace. By identifying stress triggers, we gain choice. We may not control every circumstance, but we can control how we respond. A student who falters under exams may discover that preparation, rather than panic, is the key. A parent who feels torn between responsibilities may find that setting boundaries and asking for help lightens the load. Awareness transforms stress from a vague weight into a map, guiding us to the areas where change or acceptance is needed. The moment we start paying attention, patterns reveal themselves. Certain situations, people, or habits consistently shake our calm. Naming them is not weakness, it is wisdom. It allows us to prepare, to adjust, and to approach life with intention rather than reaction. Triggers become signals rather than storms, and every recognized source of stress becomes an opportunity for insight. The first battle is not against the pressures of life, but against the unawareness that lets them control us. Once we see clearly, we can step forward with clarity, choosing which pressures deserve energy, which can be released, and which can teach patience and growth. Stress is often less about what happens to us and more about how we interpret what happens. Two people can face the same challenge, yet one crumbles while the other thrives, not because life is fair, but because perception shapes reality. The mind has a remarkable ability to turn ordinary events into mountains, or to see mountains as opportunities for growth. The difference lies in perspective, in the lens through which we view the world. There was a young teacher who dreaded parent-teacher meetings. Every time one approached, her stomach churned and her thoughts raced through worst-case scenarios. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, a colleague offered a simple insight. Maybe the meeting is not a test of your worth, but a chance to share what you care about. At first, she resisted. But gradually, as she shifted her perception, the fear that had gripped her began to ease. The same meetings, once terrifying, became moments of connection and learning. What had been a source of stress transformed into an opportunity, not because circumstances changed, but because she chose to see them differently. Stress often escalates when the mind labels situations as threats rather than challenges. A looming project, a sudden change, or a difficult conversation is neutral in itself. The tension comes from how we interpret it. Viewing difficulties as challenges invites curiosity, problem-solving, and engagement. Viewing them as threats invites anxiety, avoidance, and tension. The stories we tell ourselves in those moments, the internal dialogue, has far more power over our stress than the events themselves. Perspective also reveals itself in everyday moments. Two people stuck in traffic can experience the same delay in completely different ways. One frowns, mutters complaints, and feels time slipping away. The other tunes into a favorite podcast, reflects on life, or simply breathes deeply, noticing the stillness. The traffic itself hasn't changed, but perception shapes the experience. Similarly, challenges at work, in relationships, or within ourselves are colored by the stories we attach to them. Shifting perspective requires awareness and practice. It is the act of pausing, stepping back, and asking, how else can I see this? Is this really as threatening as I feel it to be? Over time, this small habit rewires the mind, creating resilience and calm. Stress does not vanish, but its grip weakens, and moments of tension become opportunities to exercise choice. Life continues to bring challenges, but the lens through which we view them transforms them from obstacles into teachers, from burdens into stepping stones. In learning to see clearly, we find that the storm is not as powerful as it first appeared, and we discover the quiet strength of a mind trained to respond rather than react. The mind has a remarkable ability to drift into the past or leap into the future, and it is often in those places that stress finds its home. Regret clings to what has already happened, replaying mistakes and lost opportunities, while anxiety hovers over what has yet to occur, imagining worst-case scenarios. In both the present moment, the only time that truly exists, slips away. Stress grows in that gap between what is and what we imagine. Learning to anchor ourselves in the present is one of the most powerful ways to ease tension and reclaim clarity. There was a man who worked long hours in a high-pressure job. Each morning he woke before sunrise, already thinking of deadlines, meetings, and the countless decisions that awaited him. Even as he returned home, his mind raced with unfinished tasks and worries about the future. Sleep was shallow, meals were hurried, and joy seemed distant. One evening, after yet another sleepless night, he stepped outside and simply observed the sky. He felt the cool breeze, noticed the sound of leaves rustling, and for the first time in weeks allowed himself to breathe without urgency. In that moment of presence, the weight he had carried so long began to ease. He realized that by living entirely in the past or the future, he had lost touch with the life that existed in the now. Mindfulness is not about denying stress or pretending everything is fine. It is about cultivating awareness of what is happening within and around us. Simple practices, a few deep breaths, paying attention to sensations, noting thoughts without judgment, create space between stimulus and response. That space is where choice appears, where we can respond calmly instead of reacting instinctively. Even a brief moment of awareness can interrupt the spiral of worry and restore a sense of control. Walking through a park, listening to music, or observing a simple task like washing dishes can become exercises in mindfulness. The mind naturally seeks distractions, but when attention returns gently to the present, stress begins to dissolve. Each moment of focus is a small reclaiming of peace, a reminder that life is happening now, not in memories or fears. The simple act of noticing, the texture of a leaf, the rhythm of breath, the warmth of sunlight, creates an anchor that steadies the mind against storms of tension. Living in the present does not remove responsibilities or challenges, but it changes how they are experienced. A task approached with awareness is completed with clarity rather than dread. A conversation entered with presence becomes an opportunity for connection rather than a source of anxiety. In this way, Mindfulness transforms stress from an overwhelming force into a guide, revealing what truly matters in each moment and showing that calm is not something to be found in the future, but something we cultivate here in the now. Life often overwhelms not because of what we face, but because of how much we try to carry at once. Days fill up with endless tasks, obligations, and commitments, and the mind becomes a crowded room where everything demands attention at once. Stress grows not only from the weight of responsibilities, but from the inability to choose what truly matters. Simplifying, prioritizing, and letting go of unnecessary burdens is one of the most profound ways to create space for peace and clarity. There was a woman who constantly felt like she was running, yet never arriving anywhere. Her calendar was packed with meetings, errands, social commitments, and personal goals. Even when a task was completed, another immediately took its place. The relentless pace left her exhausted, anxious, and resentful. One evening, she decided to make a list, not of what she needed to do, but of what truly mattered. She realized that many of her obligations had been accepted out of habit, expectation, or fear of disappointing others. By choosing to focus on what aligned with her values and letting go of the rest, she felt a sudden lightness she had not experienced in years. The simple act of prioritizing had turned chaos into clarity. Stress thrives in overcommitment, in the habit of saying yes, when the heart and mind long for a no. Every added responsibility without reflection piles more stones onto the back, and eventually the body and mind strain under the weight. Learning to say no is not selfish, it is an act of wisdom. It is an acknowledgement that energy is finite, attention is limited, and time is precious. Choosing what to carry and what to release transforms life from a series of demands into a series of conscious decisions, creating room for focus, growth, and joy. Simplifying is not only about tasks, but also about expectations. Perfectionism, comparisons, and imagined standards create invisible pressures far heavier than the real demands of life. A person who seeks to excel in every area, please everyone, and never falter will always feel trapped. By recognizing which expectations are essential and which are self-imposed, tension begins to fade. Even small adjustments, letting a task be good enough, delegating or pausing before committing, bring immense relief. Prioritizing and simplifying are acts of courage because they require honesty with oneself. They demand reflection on what truly matters and the willingness to let go of what does not. In doing so, life transforms from a relentless treadmill into a path where each step is chosen and intentional. The mind, once crowded and restless, becomes a space for clarity, the heart a place for calm. Stress does not disappear, but it loses its power to control, because we have learned to carry only what is necessary and meaningful, leaving room for resilience, focus, and presence. The mind and body are inseparable, and stress often manifests in both. When the body is exhausted, the mind becomes restless. When the mind is overwhelmed, the body carries tension like invisible armor. Ignoring physical well-being while trying to manage stress is like trying to row a boat with a broken oar. It is possible to move forward, but progress is slow, energy drains quickly, and the risk of capsizing is high. Maintaining the body is not a luxury. It is a foundation for resilience, clarity, and calm. There was a man who spent years in a demanding job, skipping meals, sacrificing sleep, and ignoring exercise in the belief that work and mental effort alone would sustain him. Gradually, headaches, fatigue, and irritability became constant companions. He attempted to meditate, journal, and plan his days, but his mind remained restless and stress felt inescapable. One day, on a friend's advice, he began to make small changes, walking in the morning, drinking water regularly, sleeping earlier, and preparing meals that nourished rather than simply filled. Within weeks, the tension in his chest eased, his mind became clearer, and even the challenges at work seemed more manageable. The physical care he had neglected had been the missing piece in his battle with stress. Exercise, sleep, and nutrition are not just health routines. They are anchors for mental stability. The body is constantly sending signals, yet we often ignore them until symptoms become severe. Regular movement releases built-up tension, improves circulation, and stimulates the production of chemicals that enhance mood and focus. Sleep allows the nervous system to reset, clearing emotional debris from the mind. Nourishing food fuels not only energy but also balance, providing the foundation for focus and calm. When these elements are neglected, stress escalates because the body itself becomes a source of tension, making every challenge feel heavier. Even small, consistent habits can create profound change. A short daily walk, a few minutes of stretching, or a brief period of mindful breathing can signal to the body that it is safe to release tension. Over time, these practices build resilience, creating a buffer that allows the mind to approach difficulties with clarity rather than panic. Ignoring physical well-being may feel productive in the short term, but it compounds stress in ways that no amount of planning or effort can fully counteract. The body is not separate from the mind. It is the vessel through which we experience life. Caring for it is not indulgence. It is necessity. A rested, nourished, and active body supports a mind capable of discernment, patience, and creativity. Stress is inevitable, but when the foundation of health is strong, its impact is softened. By honoring the needs of the body, we create a stable home for the mind, where challenges can be faced with energy, clarity, and a quiet confidence that comes from knowing we are fully equipped to navigate whatever life presents. Gratitude has a quiet power that many overlook, yet it can shift the entire landscape of the mind. Stress thrives in scarcity, in the sense that nothing is enough, that every moment or outcome falls short of expectation. When the mind constantly searches for what is missing, it magnifies worries and amplifies tension. Gratitude, on the other hand, trains the mind to notice what is already present, to recognize abundance even in small moments, and to anchor attention in what is real and positive rather than imagined and lacking. There was a man who felt overwhelmed by life. Work deadlines pressed him, family responsibilities weighed heavily, and personal goals seemed perpetually out of reach. Each evening he went to bed exhausted, replaying his failures and frustrations. One day, on a friend's suggestion, he decided to write down 3 things he was grateful for every morning. At first, it felt trivial. He noted a warm cup of tea, a kind word from a colleague, the sight of sunlight through his window. Within weeks, he noticed a subtle transformation. His mind, which had been a storm of anxiety, began to settle. The same pressures remained, yet they no longer had the same power over him. Gratitude had shifted his perspective, showing that life contained moments of light even amidst difficulty. Gratitude works because it changes focus. The human mind is drawn to what is missing, what is imperfect, and what threatens comfort. Left unchecked, this focus fuels stress, worry, and dissatisfaction. By consciously noticing what is positive, we interrupt that cycle. Simple acts, a smile received, a task completed, a lesson learned from a mistake, become anchors of appreciation. The mind gradually learns to see beyond what is lacking and to recognize what is already present, creating calm and resilience. Gratitude also deepens connection. When we recognize and appreciate the presence of others in our lives, relationships flourish. Small gestures of acknowledgement, a thank you, a note, a word of kindness, reinforce bonds and create support systems that buffer stress. Human connection becomes not just a social necessity, but a source of emotional strength, amplified when paired with genuine recognition and appreciation. Practicing gratitude does not erase challenges, pressures, or setbacks, but it changes how we experience them. A mind attuned to abundance perceives obstacles as temporary and manageable rather than insurmountable. It notices the help, opportunities, and small joys that exist even in difficult times. Over time, this habit reshapes mental patterns, turning stress from an overwhelming force into a signal to pause, reflect, and notice what is already sufficient. In this quiet shift, life becomes not lighter in circumstances but richer in perception, and the heart finds space to breathe amidst the storms that inevitably come. No one is meant to carry life's burdens alone, yet many try, believing that strength comes from enduring in isolation. Stress grows when it is hidden, unspoken, and internalized, because the mind cannot release tension on its own. Sharing struggles does not make one weak. It creates relief, perspective, and connection. Human beings are wired for relationship, and even a single voice listening with empathy can lighten the heaviest load. There was a young woman who constantly felt under pressure. Work deadlines, family expectations, and personal ambitions collided in her daily life, leaving her exhausted and anxious. She believed she had to face everything alone, that admitting difficulty would be a sign of inadequacy. Over time, the pressure became unbearable. One evening, she called a close friend simply to talk about her day. She spoke honestly, without embellishment or fear of judgment. To her surprise, the tension that had sat like a stone in her chest began to ease. The simple act of sharing had created space, relief, and clarity. In that moment, she realized that struggles become lighter when they are carried together. Support comes in many forms. It may be a friend who listens without interrupting, a family member who offers guidance, or a mentor who shares perspective from experience. Sometimes the most powerful support is simply knowing that someone cares, that someone is willing to hold space for your thoughts and emotions without trying to fix them immediately. This creates a buffer against the pressures of life, allowing the mind to rest, recharge, and approach challenges with renewed strength. Isolation magnifies stress because it closes the loop of perspective. When worries are trapped inside, the mind ruminates, magnifies, and distorts. Speaking aloud, seeking counsel, or simply being present with another human being interrupts that cycle. It allows us to see challenges in proportion, gain insight, and feel the reassurance that comes from connection. Even brief interactions, a shared laugh, a word of encouragement, a quiet presence, can restore balance and reduce the intensity of tension. Building support systems is not only about seeking help in moments of crisis, but about nurturing ongoing relationships that sustain us through life. Regular connection, open communication, and shared vulnerability create resilience that no amount of individual effort can match. In learning to lean on others wisely, stress loses its power to isolate or overwhelm, and life becomes less of a solitary struggle and more of a shared journey. In this, we find that the weight we carry need not crush us, because we were never meant to carry it alone. Life can often feel unbearably heavy, and yet, one of the most underestimated tools against stress is something as simple as laughter. Humor has a unique way of breaking tension, of creating distance between ourselves and the weight we carry. It does not solve problems, but it shifts perspective. It reminds the mind that no matter how serious life may feel, there is always a space where lightness can exist, where the rigid grip of worry can soften, even if only for a moment. There was a man who faced enormous pressure at work. Every day brought deadlines, criticism, and endless decisions, and he carried the weight as though it were a personal failure to endure it. One afternoon, during a tense meeting, a colleague made a small, self-deprecating joke about their own mistake. The entire room erupted in laughter, including him, and for a few minutes the tension lifted completely. In that moment, he realized that stress had grown not just from the tasks themselves, but from the seriousness with which he approached every detail. Laughter had created a gap, a release, where tension had once thrived. Humor allows the mind to step back. It is the recognition that while life is demanding, it is not all consuming. A small laugh at a minor mistake, a humorous observation about daily absurdities, or even a playful perspective on one's own flaws creates breathing room. Stress thrives in rigidity, in the belief that every detail must be controlled or every outcome predicted. Humor introduces flexibility, reminding the mind that imperfection is human and that the world does not collapse with each setback. Even in difficult circumstances, humor can act as a pressure valve. Soldiers, doctors, and teachers in high-stress professions often rely on shared laughter to cope with the intensity of their work. It is not about ignoring challenges, it is about creating mental space, a momentary pause that allows the mind to reset and face difficulties with renewed energy. Humor does not diminish responsibility, but balances it, preventing the mind from becoming trapped in relentless tension. Cultivating humor is a practice, a choice to notice the lighter side of life even amidst serious challenges. Stories, anecdotes, playful observations, or even laughter at one's own mistakes build resilience. They remind the heart and mind that no storm is permanent, that joy exists even in small doses, and that flexibility and perspective are as essential as effort and discipline. In learning to laugh amidst pressure, stress loses its rigidity, and the soul discovers relief, lightness, and the strength to face life's challenges with a steadier, calmer heart. Stress is often seen as an enemy, something to avoid or fight against, yet it carries a hidden gift when approached with awareness. Life does not promise ease, and challenges will always arise, but how we meet them determines whether they break us or shape us. Stress can be a teacher, revealing strengths we did not know we possessed, patience we had yet to discover, and resilience we had yet to cultivate. The storms of life, when faced with presence and understanding, become opportunities for growth rather than reasons for despair. There was a young man who faced constant pressure in both his professional and personal life. He felt that no matter how hard he worked, life demanded more, and he began to believe that stress was simply a punishment for ambition. One day, after a particularly exhausting week, he paused and reflected on the challenges he had overcome, the problems solved, the relationships nurtured, the lessons learned from mistakes. In that reflection, he realized that each stressful moment had strengthened him, sharpened his focus, and deepened his understanding of what truly mattered. Stress had been a teacher all along, not a tyrant. The mind often resists seeing stress as anything other than a burden because discomfort is immediate and tangible, while growth is gradual and invisible. Yet every tense moment, every challenge, and every difficult decision carries within it the seeds of resilience. By observing stress without judgment, by learning from the situations that trigger tension, and by practicing patience, focus, and reflection, one can transform the experience of life itself. Stress stops being a force that overwhelms and becomes a mirror that reveals areas for growth, self-awareness, and inner strength. Resilience is not built in moments of ease, but in moments of tension, struggle, and discomfort. A bamboo tree bends with the wind without breaking. A rigid tree snaps. In the same way, the mind and spirit that remain flexible, that learn to adapt, reflect, and respond consciously, develop a strength that is enduring. Stress, when seen through this lens, becomes a measure not of weakness but of opportunity, the chance to discover patience when rushed, clarity when confused, and courage when afraid. Ultimately, stress is not something to be conquered in a single moment, but a companion that guides us toward deeper understanding. The challenges of life will always arise, but the way they are met shapes the texture of our inner world. Every trial, every tension, every demanding circumstance carries wisdom if we are willing to observe, learn, and adjust. In embracing stress as a teacher rather than an enemy, we step into life with greater clarity, strength, and calm, discovering that the storms that once threatened to overwhelm us can instead reveal the depth and resilience within. Life will always bring moments of tension, pressure, and uncertainty. Stress is not a sign of weakness, nor is it something to fear. It is a natural part of being alive. What matters is how we choose to respond, whether we let it control us or whether we allow it to teach us, shape us, and reveal the strength within. By noticing our triggers, shifting our perspective, living in the present, caring for our bodies, cultivating gratitude, seeking connection, and embracing lightness, we create a mind and heart capable of navigating life's challenges with calm and clarity. Stress, like fire, can either consume or refine. The choice is ours. When met with awareness, patience, and conscious effort, stress becomes a teacher, resilience becomes a companion, and life, with all its ups and downs, transforms into a journey of growth, wisdom, and quiet strength. In learning to flow with life rather than resist it, we discover that even in the most turbulent moments, peace, clarity, and joy are never out of reach. They have always been waiting within.